In this lecture, students, we're going to be looking at the theory of constructivism. And last week I had told everyone to read the chapter so that for better understanding as we discuss this theory in international relations. And next week we're going to be looking at realism as another theory of international relations to begin to understand the whole idea of international relations and how it impacts countries around the world, how it impacts law, how it impacts treaties and relations between countries and among countries. In understanding this theory, we want to know some of the aspects of constructivism and understand its core tenets and how it impacts international relations. All right, so it says here, constructivism believes that the world is socially constructed, right? So again, the name gives it away, because if we say constructivism, implies that there is something being constructed. There is something being constructed. So constructivism believes that the world is socially constructed. And what does that mean, really? When we say the world is socially constructed, what does that mean? What is the import? What is the impact? How is it socially constructed? It means that our knowledge of the world comes as a result of it being socially constructed. So the knowledge we have of the world is not natural. That's what this is saying. It's not natural, but it's something that is saying it's the flux. It's something that is transient, is fleeting, so to speak, and it is constructed by humans. It's constructed by society. And that's why it changes from time to time, because it is constructed by society, it is constructed by humans. So constructivism believes that the world in which we live is socially. Now, when we say socially now, it's important to understand that human beings is referring to society. And who is in society? Human beings. And therefore, human beings are the ones constructing the ideas and the concepts and the theories that we believe in, that we eventually believe in and promote in many cases, right? So socially constructed, and that means our knowledge of the world comes as a result of it being socially constructed, right? Again, it's important to understand, students, that this is suggesting that our knowledge of the world, for example, knowledge of politics, knowledge of economics, knowledge of anthropology, knowledge of systems and infrastructure, knowledge of how institutions work, all of that is socially constructed, and it's important to understand this point. The second bullet says constructivism believes that humans are responsible for the social world. Humans are responsible for the social world. Now, again, this is suggesting, just like the first bullet, that humans are the ones that impact outcomes. They're the ones that facilitate outcomes through their actions, right? So humans are responsible for the social world in the sense that all of the institutions, all of the activities and all of the actions and everything we undertake in society is responsible for the social world, right? So again, the social world is not a natural phenomenon. It's not something that, existed before humans. Humans existed and created the social world. And that's what this is suggesting, right? And it's important to understand this as well. And constructivism then essentially is saying that everything in society is constructed. It is constructed by those who are in that particular society at that point in time. The further suggestion of that is, students, is that as generation after generation come to occupy that space, well, guess what? There's new social construction, depending on what's going on, depending on the ideologies that exist at that point, depending on the points of view of the leaders and the shakers and the leaders of society. That is what this is suggesting. The third point is constructivists focus on the impact of ideas and beliefs on world politics, and they believe that material reality is secondary to ideas and beliefs, right? So let's take this one after the other. So let's deconstruct this very point. Constructivists focus on the impact of ideas, right? How ideas impact society. That's what you're looking at. How ideas impact society, how ideas move society forward, how ideas may disintegrate society, because we've seen that around the world, where ideas, for example, communism as an ideology, as a form of government, has really failed in a lot of countries. And that's why today we don't have the Warsaw Pact countries anymore. They are all democratic countries, because the idea of communism did not work in their particular society. So constructivists focus on the impact of ideas and beliefs on world politics, right? And again, this is a very good example. The collapse of the Soviet Union, right, impacted many, many countries. And today we have well more than a dozen countries coming out of the former Soviet Union, right? So ideology and beliefs on world politics. So this is suggesting, using the Soviet example, is suggesting that the ideologies and beliefs, as a matter of fact, let's look at this again a bit carefully. Constructivists focus on the impact of ideology and beliefs on world politics. So in the case of Soviet Union then, the disintegration of the Soviet Empire, the ideas of communism, the ideas of oppression and the violation of human rights as a means of control, as a means to gain power, right, impacted the world in many ways. Now we have more than a dozen countries. Now we do not have Warsaw Pact countries anymore. Warsaw Pact is essentially dead. That's an impact on world order, on world politics, right? The changing of circumstances in these countries. So now you have countries like Romania, countries like Bulgaria, Poland are now democratic countries, essentially. And some of them are part of the European Union, and some of them are seeking membership in NATO. And NATO was a sworn enemy of Warsaw Pact during the Cold War. So the ideology of communism has impacted world politics, and they believe that material reality is secondary to ideas and beliefs. Ideas and beliefs are primary, essentially. That's what this is saying. And anything else in the world does not come or does not equal the power of ideas and the power of beliefs. Finally, constructivism believes that reality is always in a state of flux. And I referenced this earlier. Again, it's important for us to understand this, students. What does that mean? Right? Always in a state of flux. It's always moving because society is socially constructed. Constructivism believes that reality is always in a state of flux and therefore subject to change. Reality is always in a state of flux and subject to change, which opens the prospect for change, right? And that's why societies change all the time. Societies, there are new ideas, there are new philosophies, new ideologies that come to society all the time, especially a democratic society where they're encouraged to be creative, where they're encouraged to be innovative, etc. Things change all the time. Beliefs change, ideas change. That is what this is addressing, this last point is addressing. So constructivism, students, believe that reality is always in a state of flux, and flux means it's always moving, it's fluid, it's transient, right? It's never stagnant, and therefore subject to change. And when things are in a state of flux, change comes as a result. And this opens the prospect for change. Countries and societies can change depending on the leaders and main actors who influence actions. Right? So in one democratic dispensation to the other, you see sometimes substantial changes. Right? And sometimes you see not so significant changes, but incremental change. But nevertheless change. So no society is stagnant. No society is ever where they were the day before, essentially, because they are moving in thought, they're moving in ideology, because they are always creative and finding new ways to better their society. So that's constructivism as a theory in international relations. It believes that the world is socially constructed, and that means our knowledge of the world comes as a result of it being socially constructed. So whatever happens in society that is a result of human activity and human input and impact, right, becomes knowledge to society, to members of society. That's what this is saying. Okay, so let's take a look at the second point once again. Constructivism believes that humans are responsible for the social world. So whatever happens in the world is as a result of human impact and involvement. Nothing is natural. That's what this is suggesting. Now, we're not talking about earthquake and volcanoes and the tsunamis. We're talking about political activities, economic activities, social activities, right? Historical, etc., etc. That's what we're talking about here, right? So constructivism believes that humans are responsible for the social order. Constructivists focus on the impact of ideas and beliefs on world politics. I'll give an example of the Soviet Union. There are other examples as well. South Africa with apartheid, moving away from apartheid to democratic rule. That is ideas and beliefs as well. Apartheid reigned for many years, and it gave way to democratic ideology, to democratic beliefs. That's another example of how the impact of ideas and beliefs on world politics is very critical. and how it manifests. All right, and the final point here is constructivism believe that reality is always in a state of flux. So what is reality? Is what we see, our perception, right? A perception of reality. Now, reality for one person is not reality for others. Why is that? Because it depends on the person's perspective. So reality is created by an individual, and that becomes their perspective, or reality is created by a community, by a society, by the media, and that becomes the truth for that particular society, for that particular space, for that particular individual. And that's what this is also addressing. All right, so it's important for us to understand this point here. Countries and societies can change depending on the leaders and main actors who influence action. So this is constructivism, a major theory in international relations. It's important for us to understand this point as to how it is grounded, how it is impacting society, and how it is impacting ideas within the context of change, within the context of beliefs. And another point about constructivism is the fact that it believes that states can have very many identities, can have different identities, multiple identities, and those identities are socially constructed with the interactions with other countries, with the interaction with other, with their neighbors perhaps, with interaction or with, experiences that happen within the country. For example, it could be an uprising that can change identity. It could be social reforms that can change identity as well. So a lot of things can impact identity, and that's what constructivism believes as well, right? So identities are representations, right, of an actor's understanding of who they are by way of understanding the impact of identity. Small states, for example, will care about their survival, will care about their own interest, but bigger states will not care about their survival because they're big and they're strong and they're powerful and they have other interests as well, right? So small states are more focused on how they will survive, and larger states, right, are domineering. They care about hegemony. They care about power and control. They care about influence. They care about followership and leadership on the global stage. They don't have to worry about survival, essentially. And that's a result of identity as well. And constructivism then says that depending on the state and depending on the circumstances of that state, it could be on the survival mode or it could be on the power and control, right? So it says here, so essentially then, constructivism believes that the actions of a state should be consistent with its identity. A state should not be acting contrary to its identity, right? So if identity is that of power and domination, it should always be in that mode. It should not succumb to threats. It should not succumb to attacks. It should be always domineering in that mode of being a great power. That's another aspect of constructivism that we should be aware of. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and next week, don't forget to read the chapter on realism. We're going to expand on that a bit more. We're also going to say more about constructivism, what it is, its origin, the key players that forwarded this theory, and its current impact in countries around the world.